My name is Sergeant Brandon West, and I am 35 years old. I have spent most of my adult life serving in the United States Army, moving from base to base, doing the kind of work no one notices until something breaks. This morning should have felt like any other day, but it didn't, because today was the day the rest of my unit flew out to Washington while I was told to stay behind at base. I watched their transport lift off through the narrow window of the operations building, the engines fading into the sky, while I stood there with a clipboard in my hand pretending the moment did not bother me. It did, more than I wanted to admit. They were headed to the Pentagon to present the new operational strategy for our rapid response program. I was the one who built most of that system line by line, test by test, long after the others had gone home. Yet, when it came time for someone to stand in front of the generals and explain how the whole thing worked, my name never entered the conversation. They told me the unit needed someone reliable to keep things running on base and that I was the obvious choice. That should have felt like a compliment, but instead, it felt like another quiet way of saying I was good enough to carry the load, but not good enough to stand beside them. As the building emptied out, the silence made everything heavier. The office chairs sat pushed back from the desks, jackets thrown over armrests, half-finished mugs of coffee still sitting where they left them. It all looked like a party I had been excused from. I walked the hallway slowly, trying to shake off the sting, telling myself it did not matter, that recognition was never the point. Still, there was something hollow about being left behind when I knew exactly how much of myself I had poured into the mission they were about to present. I sat at my desk and pulled up the logistics dashboard, pretending the numbers on the screen needed my full attention. What I really needed was a moment to steady my thoughts. Being overlooked had become familiar, almost routine, yet today it cut deeper. Maybe it was the months of extra hours or the sacrifices no one saw. Maybe it was realizing that the people I trusted most did not see me the way I hoped they did. Whatever the reason, something inside me shifted. I just didn't know yet how far that shift would go. This wasn't the first time I'd been told to stay back. Over the years, it had become something of a pattern. Big briefings, field exercises, high-level meetings, they all seemed to happen without me. I was always the one holding the clipboard, syncing the comms, checking supply chains, building the systems so the others could shine. I used to tell myself that being behind the scenes meant I was essential, but lately, it just felt like being invisible. The base was unusually quiet after they left that morning. Trucks parked in tight lines, lights dimmed in the ops center, and radios silent except for the occasional status update. The kind of stillness that didn't feel restful. It felt empty. I walked past the main staging area, where just yesterday there had been a flurry of gear checks and last-minute mission briefs. Now it was all folded flags and abandoned coffee cups. I found myself back in the logistics hub, where my real work happened. Monitors flickered with heat maps and deployment models I had built from scratch. Every scenario, every reroute contingency, every fuel estimate, they all had my fingerprint on them. But no one cared about that when it was time to stand in front of a general and talk strategy. That spotlight was reserved for others. I got the dim glow of fluorescent lights and a line of error logs to clear before noon. It might have stung less if this was a one-time thing, but it wasn't. I remembered a mission last spring where the extraction plan failed because the lead team ignored my suggested route. They called it a communications breakdown. I called it what it was. They didn't think to ask the guy who designed the damn system. I still remember the moment they gave the final word before leaving. My CO didn't even look at me when he said it. He just walked past and tossed the words over his shoulder, like they were nothing. Stay behind, we'll handle the Pentagon. I stood there, half expecting him to turn around, maybe add something, an explanation, a nod, a thank you. But there was nothing. Just the sound of boots fading down the hall and the door shutting behind them. The thing is, I'm not some kid craving medals or attention. I don't need a round of applause every time a mission goes well, but I've earned more than this. I've been the backbone of every coordinated movement our unit has pulled off for the last 5 years. I've written protocols that got picked up by other divisions. I've covered for mistakes, cleaned up messes, and kept things moving when everything else stalled. And still, when the moment came, I was told to sit down and stay quiet. The resentment wasn't sharp, not the kind that flares up and fades away. It was slow, steady, and familiar, like a splinter you've stopped trying to remove. You just learn how to live around it. But something about this time was different. Maybe it was how casually they dismissed me. Or maybe I was finally tired of pretending it didn't matter. I walked out to the observation deck near the edge of the compound. You could still see the faint trail of the transport plane cutting across the sky, heading east toward Washington. I stared at it longer than I should have, wondering what version of the truth they'd be selling once they got there. They'd talk about innovation and efficiency, use words I'd written in reports they barely skimmed. They'd show off systems they didn't even know how to troubleshoot, and they'd stand tall doing it, while I kept everything from falling apart behind the scenes. The silence back at base started to feel heavier, like it was pressing into my chest. I wanted to scream or throw something, but I didn't. That's not who I am. I just stood there with my hands in my pockets, letting the weight settle. Inside, a message buzzed on my screen. It was a checklist update. Minor, nothing urgent. Still, I opened it and got to work. Because that's what they expected. And for now, it was easier to keep doing the job than think too much about why I was the only one left to do it. It was late, maybe close to midnight. The base had gone completely quiet, just the low hum of the server room and the soft buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. I was half asleep at my desk, clicking through maintenance reports without really seeing them. My mind kept drifting back to that moment earlier in the day when the team left. I thought I had finally buried the frustration, but it kept bubbling up in the silence. Then the notification popped up in the corner of my screen. Just a small alert, no sound, but something about the sender's name made me sit up straighter. Colonel Jared Whitmore. I'd seen the name before. High-ranking logistics, command, Pentagon-level oversight. Not someone who ever had a reason to reach out to me. I hesitated before clicking. For a second, I wondered if it was a mistake or maybe some internal update being forwarded down the chain. But it wasn't a mistake. It was addressed to me directly. Sergeant West, I've reviewed the operational framework you submitted through the VisionNet archive. I'd like to speak with you regarding your design. That was all it said. No greeting, no fluff, just a direct acknowledgement that someone, somewhere up top, had actually read what I wrote. My hand hovered over the mouse for a few seconds longer than it should have. I kept rereading the lines, thinking maybe I misunderstood. This was the same document I had compiled in my own time, after hours, when no one asked me to. I never expected it to make it past our division folders, let alone land on a colonel's desk at the Pentagon. And yet, here it was. A strange mix of feelings hit me all at once. There was disbelief, sure, but also this quiet rush of something I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't pride exactly. It was something softer, like recognition, like someone had finally turned around and noticed the guy keeping the gears from grinding to a halt. After all this time, someone had seen the work. Not the title, not the rank, just the work itself. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glow of the screen. The email sat there like a spark in the dark, small but impossible to ignore. It didn't change anything right away. But deep down, I knew this was the moment everything began to shift. I didn't sleep much that night. The email kept replaying in my head. By morning, I had already gone over my system notes 3 times and prepped a simple outline just in case. I still half believed it would get canceled last minute. Maybe someone would realize they'd invited the wrong person and pull the plug. But at 0900 sharp, the call connected. Faces popped up on the screen one by one. A few in suits, others in uniform, all serious. Right behind me in the room sat my CO and 2 senior officers, arms crossed, faces stiff. I could feel the tension before a single word was spoken. My palms were sweating, but I held it together. Colonel Whitmore kicked things off, asking me to walk through the design behind the modular logistics matrix. I took a breath and started speaking. At first, my voice felt tight, like it might crack. But the more I explained, the more it settled. I knew this system better than anyone. I had built it from the ground up, piece by piece, long nights with no one watching. I didn't need to bluff or sell anything. I just told the truth. About 10 minutes in, I noticed the shift. The faces on the screen leaned in. Questions came fast, precise, technical. I answered each one clearly. Behind me, my CO was scribbling notes, eyes darting across the page like he was trying to catch up. One of the Pentagon staff asked about fallback integration with outdated comms grids. I gave him 3 alternatives without hesitating. Another asked about scalability across NATO deployments. I had data for that too. I caught a glance from one of the majors next to me. His brow was furrowed. He didn't understand what I was saying, not fully. The same guy who once told me to stay in my lane now looked like he'd wandered into the wrong meeting. I felt something rise in my chest. Not arrogance, but something close. Vindication. The meeting ended after 45 minutes. Colonel Whitmore thanked me and asked to continue the conversation one-on-one later that week. Just me. Not the unit. Not the officers. Me. I nodded, keeping my face neutral, but inside, everything was shifting. I stood a little straighter when the call ended. For the first time, they hadn't just let me speak, they had actually listened. They called me into the conference room the next morning. No explanation, just a short message from command. I walked in and found them already seated. Major Levin, Colonel Ames, and Captain Dwyer, all 3 stiff-backed, their faces locked in that look officers get when they think they're in control of a situation. The door closed behind me with a soft click. No one offered a seat, so I stood. Levin started, voice clipped, asking why I'd contacted the Pentagon without going through the chain of command. I kept my hands at my sides, steady. I said I hadn't contacted anyone. They reached out to me, and I responded, professionally, with full transparency. Ames leaned forward. His tone was heavier, layered with warning. He said this kind of behavior created confusion in the ranks, undermined trust. I met his stare without flinching. I told him the only thing that had been undermined was the recognition of effort from those keeping the whole damn place functional. That didn't sit well. Dwyer crossed his arms and looked away, jaw tense. They didn't expect me to push back. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I told them my name was on that framework. My hours, my strategy, my systems. If someone at the Pentagon saw value in it, I wasn't about to apologize for that. And I sure as hell wasn't going to pretend I hadn't been carrying this unit operationally for years while others took the spotlight. The silence stretched after that. Not angry, just thick. The kind of silence that creeps in when something undeniable is said. Levin shifted in his chair, like he wanted to say something else but couldn't find the words. Dwyer finally looked back at me, and for the first time, his eyes weren't dismissive. They were wary. I wasn't out to embarrass anyone. I wasn't looking for payback. But I wasn't going to be boxed in anymore either. I told them flat out I wasn't breaking protocol. I was following it. A superior officer reached out. I answered. I provided the facts. If that made them uncomfortable, maybe it was time they asked themselves why. Ames nodded slowly, but he didn't say anything else. Just dismissed me with a quiet nod. As I turned to leave, I could feel their eyes on my back. Not with contempt, not anymore. With concern. Because for the first time, they weren't sure who actually held the leverage in the room. And neither was I. But it felt like the balance had shifted. 2 days later, the call came through. It wasn't just a follow-up or a formality. It was an official offer. Direct from the Office of Defense Operations. They wanted me to step into a strategic advisory role, working across multiple rapid response units nationwide. I read the message twice, then a third time, just to be sure I wasn't misreading it. The language was clear. They had reviewed my framework and saw potential far beyond the base. They wanted someone who could build systems that lasted, that adapted, that worked in the field. Someone who didn't just patch problems but anticipated them. My name wasn't just on the short list. It was the only one. Not long after that, The same officers who had questioned me sat me down again. This time, they didn't accuse or raise voices. Instead, they offered me an internal promotion, something quick. Senior operations officer. Maybe even a path to executive command. A few extra stripes, a new title, but I saw it for what it was. A safety net. A way to keep control. A way to save face after years of dismissing my work and keeping me in the background. It wasn't a gesture of trust. It was damage control. I sat there, listening, respectful but unmoved. Then I thanked them for the offer. I told them I appreciated the gesture, but I was saying no. Levin looked confused. Ames looked disappointed. Dwyer didn't say much at all. I told them this wasn't a rebellion. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about finally stepping into the role I'd already been quietly doing. Except now, I'd be doing it with authority, with clarity, and with people who actually saw the value in what I brought. It felt like a turning point. Like I'd been underwater for too long and finally surfaced. The weight I'd carried, trying to be enough in a system that never saw me, started to fall away. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done asking to be seen. I had been seen. When I left that room, I didn't slam the door or look back. I just walked out, steady, focused. The path ahead wasn't guaranteed. It would come with pressure, with higher stakes, but it would be mine. Not handed down, not borrowed. Earned. And for the first time, I wasn't following, I was leading. I accepted the Pentagon's offer the next morning. But before packing up, I requested one final meeting, not with commanders. With the entire unit. If I was going to leave, I needed them all to hear it directly from me. Not filtered through chain of command or buried in some memo. They gathered in the main hall. Some in uniform, others still rubbing sleep from their eyes. I stood at the front, not with rank but with resolve. And I laid it out. The system I built. The one that kept supply chains smooth, deployments fast, and field teams supported. I explained how every part worked. How it held the unit together when plans fell apart. But then I did what no one had dared to do. I named names. Not to shame but to shine light. I pointed to the tech specialist who built the real-time tracking. The junior officer who redesigned our logistics chain. The corporal who stayed late every night fixing comms after drills. None of them ever got thanked. None of them got medals. They got silence. I called out the culture that had ignored them. I said what we all knew but no one had said aloud. That leadership had stopped leading. That we needed more than orders. We needed acknowledgement. We needed truth. And we needed to build a system that rewarded the right people. Not just the loudest. There was no applause. Just silence. Heavy, still, but not empty. Some nodded. Some looked down. Some looked straight at me, eyes wide with something like relief. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was clear. I told them I was leaving, but I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was moving into a place where I could make changes that reached back here. I told them they deserved better, and that if I had to be the one to start pulling that thread, I would. As I walked toward the door, someone stood. Then another. Not clapping, just standing, like they understood, like they saw what was happening. Maybe for the first time. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. That moment wasn't about a goodbye. It was about reclaiming something we all had been told to suppress. Our voices. And for the first time, mine was heard, loud and clear. The first week in my new office at the Pentagon felt unreal. The walls were lined with maps, monitors, and the quiet hum of operations I had only ever seen from a distance. I sat behind the desk, finally alone, finally in a place where my work mattered on its own. That's when the package arrived. Small, brown, unassuming, no label except my name written in neat, familiar handwriting. Inside was a team insignia, polished, weighty, and meaningful. Beneath it, a folded note. I opened it carefully, unfolding the paper as though it contained some final piece of a puzzle I hadn't realized was missing. Written in short, deliberate words, it said, "You changed everything for us. My breath caught, not for the gift itself, but for the acknowledgement, the simple validation I had craved for so long. The work, the nights, the silent hours of planning and adjusting, all of it mattered. Someone had seen it, truly seen it. I held the note in my hand, turning it over slowly. I thought about the past few years at the base, about all the times I had kept systems running while others received the praise. The long nights, the overlooked contributions, the moments when it felt like I was invisible, none of that mattered anymore. I had stepped out of the shadow and into a place where my expertise and dedication were recognized. Sitting in the office, I felt a calm settle over me. No triumph, no need for dramatic gestures, just peace. I could finally let go of the frustration that had built up, the quiet resentment that had lingered in corners of my mind. I was not just doing my duty, I was being appreciated for it, and it was enough. The weight lifted from my shoulders was subtle but profound, and for the first time in years, I felt a kind of quiet pride that had nothing to do with rank or medals. I placed the insignia on the corner of my desk where I could see it, a reminder but not a trophy. It was proof that every unseen action, every careful calculation, every late-night adjustment had mattered. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I was part of the work that would shape operations, part of the force that kept others safe and effective. And someone had acknowledged that without fanfare, without ceremony, just honesty, just truth. As I leaned back in my chair and let the city stretch out before me through the window, I realized something important. Success is never just about accolades or recognition. Sometimes, it's about knowing that what you've done has made a difference, that your presence, your effort, your careful attention has changed the course for others. That knowledge alone can be enough to carry you forward. And in that moment, it was enough for me.